couldn't move up really unless you were born into that upper, you know, tier, that upper top tier. You really couldn't move yourself up. But when the printing press came along, you had this sort of widespread interest now in reading, and people began to become more educated. We began to move sort of from a system. And when I say we, I'm not just talking about the U.S. basically, because at this time, of course, we're talking mostly about Europe. But there was a system where um, they moved, or we moved, if you want to call it we or they moved from a system of kind of an agricultural society more towards sort of today we have an information society, right, where the more information you have, the better off you're going to be, the more educated you're going to be, things like that, right? So we kind of moved from an agricultural society. Then later on, as people became more educated, we got into like the industrial society, and today we kind of live in an information society, right? And basically, though, the way that the publishing industry works today in the traditional model is that if you are an author, and when I say author, I'm not just talking about books, but I'm also talking about musician or filmmaker, whatever it might be. But you need an agent, and the agent will represent your work, represent you, but by extension, your work for a certain commission. Usually that commission is in the traditional model, it's about 15%, right? Not a lot. I mean, you're only going to get 15%. So you really don't make a lot unless you're one of the top, Lady Gagas or, J.K. Rowling, people like that, right? So unfortunately, the publishing industry, it's tough to break in and it's tough to make money. And but when you do it, you can become very successful very fast, right? And one of the sayings is that in the industry, sometimes it's harder to find an agent than it is to find a publisher, because the thinking is that if you can get an agent, first of all, then they're going to know publishers, right? They're going to have contacts, and then you're going to be able to get a deal. And basically, the reason why publishers do not accept, if you were to like contact a major publisher, a major record label, and say, here's my work, they're not going to listen to you, right? They don't accept unsolicited works. The reason for that is, first of all, lawsuits, right? Because you had this whole thing in the 60s, 70s, especially in the music industry, where a lot of times these labels would take works from these unknown people, right? These unknown musicians. But guess what? It turns out that they ripped somebody else off, and there was all kinds of lawsuits. But even bigger than that, though, the reason why they don't take unsolicited works these days is because everybody thinks they're a superstar, right? And if they did take unsolicited works, they'd be just bombarded with all these people who think that they have the next big Harry Potter book or something like that, right? So as a way to kind of to kind of circumvent this problem is they take these agents who act as kind of filters or intermediaries, and they say that agents are experts, right? They're going to be able to distinguish a great work, something that's going to sell, from something that's maybe not so good, right? And that's why the publishers will trust the agents to deliver them the top talent, right? That's why you need an agent, because if you try to do something unsolicited, most of the time it's going to end up in the trash, right? So you need an agent. So here's the deal. Where can you find agents? Well, there's a number of resources. They have these books here at our Full Sail Media Center, I believe. They might not have the latest, like up to the 2014, or well, 2014 is not even out yet, but they won't even have maybe the 2013 necessarily. But that being said, a lot of times, even if you go and you find a book that's for like from 2011 or something like that, a lot of their contact information is the same, or you can easily find, a lot of times they'll give you their website and the website's the same, or you can easily just do a Google search with the information and be able to find them now. Okay, so you can find these books. Here's the Guide to Literary Agents. Here's the Songwriters Market. Here is the How to Get a Literary Agent. There's other sources as well, though. You can find lots of sources online. For example, those of you in the film industry, you can go to like the Writers Guild of America website, and they have listings of agents. You can, um, if you have like IMDb Pro, right, you could find lots of agents that way. And there's lots of other sites as well. In fact, let me see if I have I think, just real quickly, let me see if I still have this. I might not, but I think Um, okay, I thought I had, maybe I have it in Safari real quickly. Let me just try something in Safari. Um, if not, that's okay. Okay, yeah, I have it somewhere, but I have, but anyways, though, I had a list of some other sites you can check out. But I mean, you can do your research, and part of Project One, by the way, is to do your research. And by the way, I know that all these books down here, they cost money, but if you go to any major library, you can go, if you're right here in Orlando, you can go to the UCF library. It's not going to, it's technically a public library. You can't check anything out without a card. You might have to pay, but you can find these books easily. In fact, I know exactly where they are because I go to that library quite a bit. It's on the first floor. You can't even check these books out, but you can just take it off the shelf and do some research in these books and copy information down, make copies or write it down, right? So you can find these books at any major library, and that's, here's a starting point where you can find agents, right? Now the key thing is that you want to find an agent though that represents you specifically. You don't just want to take a list of like the first 5 agents you find, but let's just say hypothetically that you're on the book team and you're interested in doing a book project for this class. Well, and let's just say, for example, that your genre is science fiction, right? You want to find agents in these books here in the Guide to Literary Agents. You want to find agents who specifically mention in their little description that they represent science fiction, right? You don't want to take an agent who's going to contact an agent who's going to say that they only represent, uh, romance novels or something like that, because they're not going to be interested in your book, right? So part of Project One is doing the research and finding the right agent for you, right? Now, if you do this in real life, of course, you're probably going to be contacting several agents, which is fine, and they know that. But I mean, just for Project One, all you need to do is find one, right? And you need to submit a query letter. So that's what you need to do for Project One. And before I move on here, so a query letter, one of the things you want to do here before I show you some examples, just some things to mention here. You want to explain who you are, first of all, what your credibility is. You want to have a quick, eye-catching synopsis of the project, what we call a sizzle line, and I'll show you what that is. And you want to be saying yes to the following questions, right? Are you a pro? For this one, it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're like an established author or something like that, but I mean, you could say that you're a master's student, that you're expert in your field, you're knowledgeable about the subject, right? Do you have a track record? Well, maybe not, but maybe you do, right? Even if you're hypothetically, let's just say that you're in a band, you're a musician, your track record might not be, thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of records sold, but you might have a band and you might have a Facebook fan page and you might have, you know, hundreds of followers. That's something that you can mention, right? Have you published before? Again, some of these questions you might not always be able to say yes to, but if you have published before, then you certainly want to mention that, right? Do you have a fan base? Once again, I mean, Facebook fans, that counts, right? And then would you be able to act as a co-marketer? Um, the answer would be obviously yes. You'd be willing to set up a Facebook page. So let's take a look here at some of these tips. By the way, these are all in our references. If you want to, I'm not going to go through all of these now, but these are in our references if you want to take a look at them, right? We have a literary agent guide. We have Kim put together a document before you contact an agent, which maybe I'll show you that one. There's agent query tips. So let's take a look at what these are. And so give me a second here. Let's look at this. Okay, so actually, before I show you the details of Project One, let's take a look here. This is the agent query tips that you could have. I'm not going to go through all of these, obviously, but I mean, here's just some general things. You want to make sure that you follow these things, right? You want to make sure that you're using basic business letter format. I'll show you an example of that. Keep the letter to a single page. Obviously proofread, things like that. And actually, time out a second before I go on. Let me address this first one here as well. Okay, and actually, let me go back to this for a second too. Here's the thing: if you do this in real life, when you look at these books, they're going to have specific information that they want you to know before you contact them. So what I mean by that is, for example, some agents will say, please send me your query letter and send it to me by traditional post office mail. And in that, attach a 5-page book proposal, or a 5-page synopsis. The next agent that you see might do things completely different. They might say, send me a query letter, but only an email. Don't send me a regular mail, and only send me a 1-page synopsis, right? And it's going to vary from agent to agent. And I know this can drive authors crazy, right? But that's part of the game. You have to do that. So if you do this for real, just make sure that there might be specific guidelines, right? Now, for the purposes of Project One, though, you don't have to, all you have to do is do the letter. And for Project 2, we have specific templates that we'll talk about next week, specific templates for you to follow, okay? So keep in mind, we're kind of doing this as kind of a general approach, but if you do this in real life, they might have different rules. Like the one that we're going to show you next week is just like maybe a 4 to 5 page document that has specific categories that we want you to follow, okay? But if you do this for real, there might be other categories and the rules might be different. That's just a heads up that, you definitely want to do whatever it says in those books, right? If you do this for real, okay? And of course, some things to avoid, though. You want to avoid like weird fonts. Don't try to be too fancy. You don't want to hype up your work by saying, oh, how much everybody's going to love it. The agent's going to say, hey, I'll be the judge of that, right? And also don't go off on a tangent, simply get to the point, okay? So let's take a look here at the guidelines for Project One. So Project One, this is, okay, so let's look here. First of all, you want to determine what field you're in, right? What kind of agent are you going to be talking to here? Are you going to be talking to a literary agent who might be representing a book or maybe even a screenplay? Are you going to be talking to an agent that represents music? You get the point, right? That's number one. Determine what content that you have. Try to, once again, use some of those books if you want, or do your own research online, or even talking with people, because a lot of you might know people already in the industry who know agents, and maybe there's somebody that you know who knows an agent that can kind of refer you, right? So there's lots of ways, but I just want to stress, though, that sometimes Kim and I get questions, well, where can I find an agent? Well, that's part of Project One. It's not just the letter. I mean, the letter is kind of the deliverable. That's what you deliver. But part of doing Project One before you even do the letter is to do your research on that. So Kim and I can't give you, a million different sources. Oh, here's one. Part of it is doing your research on that, okay? And number 3 is to draft a standard query letter to the agent, use traditional business block format and things like that. And number 4, this is, believe it or not, this is something that gets left out for Project One. Now, obviously, in real life, you don't have to do this. You don't have to do number 4. But for the purposes of Project One, make sure that you do this. Make sure that you tell Kim or I exactly like where you found the source, whether it's a website, whether it is one of those books. It doesn't have to be an APA or MLA format. It can just literally be like a link, right? I found the source from the following website, and then just copy and paste the link. That's fine, right? Doesn't have to be any special format. Just show where you found the link. But you'd be surprised how many very, very good letters that we get, and the students it'll be a very good letter, but at the end, they won't tell us where they found the link. So you can do this at the very bottom of the page, or if you want to even put it on like its own separate thing on like page 2 or something like that, that's fine. But just show us where you found that, right? So let's take a look here at some examples. And I want to show you how to do Project One, some tips on this. And so let's take a look here. That's a student example. I'll show you that here in a second. But let's take a look here at this one. Now, Suzanne is a friend of Kim and I's who is given us permission to show us this. And by the way, those of you you all took the negotiation class, right? With Christy, I believe, right? Well, the person who taught the class before Christy was Suzanne. and she left quite a while ago now. But anyways, so she used to teach that class. And anyways, she wrote a book, and let's take a look here at this letter. Okay. Now, just right off the bat here, let me show you some things that she did wrong, because this is an example of a letter that's okay. It's not terrible, but it's not very good either. And let me actually, to make it easier to see, let me kind of blow this up a little bit. Okay, so right off the bat, before we even get into the content of the letter, she's got a couple of mistakes. The first thing is the date. Okay, the date should actually be not here, but it should actually go above right here. Okay, so that's the first thing that's wrong. You would actually have, in fact, let me just, to make this easy, let's just fix this right now. Okay, so it should look like this. Okay, so you want to have the date above. Okay, then a big mistake that she makes right off the bat is right here, to whom it may concern. You want to definitely avoid this. Do not do this. We see this a lot, and you can always tell the students who attended these go-to sessions and those that didn't, because those that don't, we always see this, right? To whom it may concern. You want to have somebody specifically, right? Now, here's the thing about this, because we've had, guest speakers come in. I've talked to people in the publishing world who have said that obviously this is bad. You don't want to have that. But sometimes students or just aspiring authors will say, well, it doesn't list any specific person. Well, here's what people in the industry say. Pick up the phone and call them.